The grand ballroom of the royal palace sparkled with crystal chandeliers and golden decorations. Tonight was the annual charity gala, where the most important people in the country gathered to support children's hospitals. Among the crowd of elegant guests, Marcus Thompson stood tall in his crisp black uniform, his Royal Guard badge gleaming under the bright lights. Marcus had served as a Royal Guard for 8 years. He was known for his calm nature and professional attitude. His dark skin contrasted beautifully with his pristine uniform, and his warm smile had made him popular among both colleagues and the royal family members he protected. The evening was going smoothly until Colonel Harrison Wright arrived. Wright was a former military officer who had recently retired after 30 years of service. He was a tall, stern man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. Wright had built his reputation on strict discipline and traditional values, but some whispered that his views were stuck in the past. As Wright entered the ballroom with his wife, he immediately noticed Marcus standing near the main entrance. The sight of a black man in a Royal Guard uniform seemed to disturb him. Wright's face tightened with disapproval as he watched Marcus professionally greeting guests and checking invitations. Wright approached his old friend, General Peterson, who was also attending the event. "Peterson," Wright said quietly, "when did they start letting people like him into the Royal Guard?" He nodded toward Marcus with obvious disdain. General Peterson, uncomfortable with the comment, tried to change the subject. "The decorations look wonderful tonight, don't they?" But Wright was not easily distracted. His eyes remained fixed on Marcus, who was simply doing his job with grace and professionalism. The young guard had no idea that he was being watched with such hostility. As the evening progressed, more guests arrived. Marcus continued his duties, helping elderly guests find their seats, returning lost items, and ensuring everyone felt welcome. His kindness and attention to detail did not go unnoticed by the other attendees, many of whom smiled and thanked him for his service. Wright, however, grew more agitated as he watched. In his mind, the Royal Guard should look different. He believed that certain positions should only be held by certain types of people. His outdated thinking was about to lead him into a situation that would change everything. The charity auction was about to begin, and guests were finding their seats. Marcus was stationed near the stage, ready to assist if needed. The atmosphere was joyful and elegant, with soft music playing in the background. Nobody could have predicted what was about to happen next. Wright finished his second glass of wine and decided he had seen enough. He stood up from his table, straightened his formal jacket, and began walking toward Marcus with determined steps. His wife called after him, sensing trouble, but Wright ignored her plea to sit back down. Other guests noticed the older man approaching the young guard, but they assumed it was a friendly conversation. Marcus saw Wright coming and prepared to greet him politely, as he did with all guests. He had no reason to expect anything other than a normal interaction. The moment that would test Marcus's character and change many people's perspectives was about to unfold in front of hundreds of witnesses. Wright stopped directly in front of Marcus, his face red with anger and alcohol. The music seemed to fade as nearby guests sensed tension in the air. Marcus maintained his professional posture, offering a respectful nod to the older man. "Good evening, sir. How may I assist you tonight?" Marcus asked in his calm, friendly voice. Wright's response shocked everyone within hearing distance. "You can assist me by leaving this place immediately." "You don't belong here, boy." The word boy hit the air like a slap. Several guests gasped and turned to look at the unfolding scene. Marcus felt his heart rate increase, but his training kicked in. He had dealt with difficult people before, though never quite like this. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm on duty tonight. Is there something specific you need help with?" Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady and professional. Wright stepped closer, his voice getting louder. "I said leave. This is a respectable event for respectable people. Your kind doesn't belong in the Royal Guard. When I served this country, we knew how to maintain proper standards." The ballroom began to quiet as more people noticed the confrontation. Lady Margaret Whitmore, a prominent member of society, moved closer to hear what was happening. Ambassador Chen, who was visiting from another country, stopped his conversation to observe the scene. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes on him. He knew that how he handled this moment would define not just his own reputation, but possibly influence how others viewed people who looked like him. The weight of representation sat heavily on his shoulders. "Sir, I understand you may have concerns, but I am here in my official capacity as a member of the Royal Guard. I've been serving in this position for 8 years, Marcus explained calmly. Wright's anger intensified. 8 years too long. In my day we had standards. We had order. Look around you, this is a palace, not some community center. General Peterson finally approached, realizing his old friend was creating a scene. Harrison, perhaps we should— Stay out of this, Peterson, Wright snapped. Someone needs to say what everyone is thinking. But Wright was wrong about what everyone was thinking. Many guests were looking at him with disapproval and embarrassment. Mrs. Eleanor Hartford, a respected philanthropist, shook her head in disgust. Young couples whispered to each other about how inappropriate Wright's behavior was. Marcus noticed a small group of children from the charity organization watching from across the room. They had been invited to see the beautiful palace and meet some of the guards. Their innocent faces reminded him why his response mattered so much. The tension reached its peak when Wright raised his voice loud enough for the entire ballroom to hear. I'm ordering you to leave this premises immediately. I may be retired, but I still outrank you, and I will not stand for this disgrace to our traditions. The room fell completely silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing. All eyes were on Marcus, waiting to see how he would respond to this public humiliation and direct challenge to his right to be there. Marcus took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and prepared to give a response that would surprise everyone in attendance. Marcus looked directly into Wright's angry eyes, his own expression remaining completely calm. When he spoke, his voice carried across the silent ballroom with quiet dignity and strength. Colonel Wright, I respect your years of service to our country. I truly do. But I need to respectfully disagree with your assessment of the situation. The crowd held its breath. Wright's face grew even redder, expecting an argument or confrontation. Instead, Marcus continued in the same measured tone. You see, sir, I didn't just wake up one day and decide to put on this uniform. I earned this position through years of training, testing, and dedication. I graduated top of my class from the Royal Guard Academy. I've protected members of the royal family during international visits. I've received commendations for excellence in service. Lady Whitmore nodded approvingly from the crowd. Ambassador Chen leaned forward, impressed by Marcus's composure under pressure. Marcus gestured gently toward the room around them. This palace, these traditions you speak of, they mean just as much to me as they do to you, maybe even more, because I know what it feels like to earn something that others might take for granted. Wright opened his mouth to interrupt, but Marcus politely raised his hand and continued. When I was a child, my grandmother used to clean offices in buildings like this. She would tell me stories about the beautiful places she worked, and I would dream about being someone important enough to belong in such places. Not as someone cleaning them, but as someone protecting them. The crowd was captivated. Even Wright seemed momentarily taken aback by the personal nature of Marcus's response. My grandmother taught me that dignity comes from how you treat others, not from the color of your skin or where you were born. She taught me that respect is earned through character, not demanded through intimidation. Marcus straightened his uniform jacket and looked around the room, making eye contact with various guests before returning his attention to Wright. You say I don't belong here, Colonel, but I disagree. I belong here because I've proven myself worthy through my actions, my dedication, and my service. I belong here because the royal family trusts me to protect them. I belong here because my fellow guards accept me as their equal and their brother. General Peterson watched with amazement as his old friend. Wright stood speechless for the first time in decades. Marcus then did something unexpected. He stepped forward and extended his hand to Wright in a gesture of respect. Colonel, I would be honored to shake the hand of a man who served our country with distinction. Your service matters and your experience has value, but so does mine. So does my right to serve alongside you as an equal. The gesture left Wright completely stunned. He had expected anger, defensiveness, or an argument. Instead, he was faced with grace, wisdom, and an offer of mutual respect. The ballroom remained silent as everyone waited to see if Wright would accept the handshake or continue his confrontational stance. Wright stared at Marcus's extended hand for what felt like an eternity. The entire ballroom watched in complete silence, waiting for his decision. His wife watched nervously from their table, hoping her husband would make the right choice. Slowly, Wright's expression began to change. The anger in his eyes started to fade, replaced by something else. Perhaps surprise, maybe even admiration. Marcus's calm response had completely disarmed him. He had expected a fight but instead received a lesson in dignity. "You know," Wright said quietly, his voice much softer than before, "in 30 years of military service, I've seen many soldiers crack under pressure. I've seen grown men lose their composure over much smaller challenges than what you just faced." Marcus kept his hand extended. Patient and unwavering, Wright continued, "You just handled yourself with more class and professionalism than most officers I've served with. I came here with assumptions based on prejudice, and you responded with wisdom and grace." The crowd leaned in, straining to hear every word of this remarkable transformation. "Young man," Wright said, finally reaching out and grasping Marcus's hand in a firm handshake, "I owe you an apology, a public one." Spontaneous applause broke out across the ballroom. Lady Whitmore wiped tears from her eyes. Ambassador Chen smiled broadly, clearly moved by what he had witnessed. Wright turned to address the crowd, his voice now carrying genuine remorse. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must ask for your forgiveness. I allowed old prejudices and narrow thinking to embarrass myself and insult a man who clearly deserves nothing but respect." He turned back to Marcus. "Guard Thompson, your response tonight taught me something important. True character isn't about what you look like or where you come from. It's about how you handle yourself when faced with injustice and ignorance." Marcus nodded graciously. "Thank you, Colonel Wright. That means a great deal coming from a man of your experience." Wright wasn't finished. "If I may ask, how did you learn to respond with such composure?" "Most people would have been angry, and rightfully so." Marcus smiled gently. "My grandfather was a pastor. He always told me that anger is easy but wisdom is hard. He said that when someone tries to make you small, you have a choice. You can make yourself smaller by responding with anger, or you can make yourself bigger by responding with grace." The crowd murmured appreciatively at this wisdom. "Besides," Marcus added with a slight grin, "getting angry wouldn't have helped anyone learn anything. But having a conversation might help us all understand each other better." Wright chuckled, genuinely impressed. "You're absolutely right. I learned more about character in the last 5 minutes than I did in some of my military leadership courses." General Peterson approached with a look of pride mixed with relief. "Harrison, I think you've just met one of the finest guards in the Royal Service." Wright nodded emphatically. "I believe you're right, Peterson. Completely right." The atmosphere in the ballroom had completely transformed from tension to warmth and respect. As the evening continued, something remarkable happened. Wright remained near Marcus, engaging in genuine conversation about military service, leadership, and life experiences. Other guests, inspired by what they had witnessed, also approached to speak with Marcus. Ambassador Chen was particularly interested in Marcus's background. "Guard Thompson, I've attended diplomatic events around the world, and I've rarely seen such poise under pressure. Have you considered a career in diplomacy?" Marcus laughed warmly. "Thank you, Ambassador, but I love what I do. Every day brings new challenges and opportunities to serve." Lady Whitmore joined their conversation. "Young man, what you demonstrated tonight was extraordinary. The way you turned a confrontational situation into a teaching moment was simply masterful." Wright overheard and nodded in agreement. "He's absolutely right, Lady Whitmore. I came here tonight thinking I knew everything about leadership and respect. This young man just schooled me without making me feel foolish." The children from the charity organization had been watching the entire interaction from across the room. Their chaperone, Mrs. Davidson, brought them over to meet Marcus. "Mr. Marcus," asked 8-year-old Sarah, "why didn't you get mad at that man? He was being mean to you." Marcus knelt down to Sarah's eye level. "Well, Sarah, getting mad wouldn't have helped anything. But talking to him and helping him understand, that might help him treat other people better in the future." 10-year-old David raised his hand as if he were in school. "My dad says some people are just mean and you can't change them." "Your dad might be right about some people," Marcus replied gently. "But I've learned that most people aren't really mean inside. Sometimes they're scared, or they learned wrong things when they were young, or they just haven't had a chance to see things differently." Wright, who had been listening to this conversation, stepped forward. "Children, this man is absolutely right. I wasn't really mean inside. I was just carrying around some wrong ideas that I learned a long time ago. Guard Thompson helped me see that I was wrong." The children looked between Wright and Marcus with wide, curious eyes. "So you're friends now?" asked Sarah. Wright looked at Marcus and smiled. "I hope so. I'd be honored to call Guard Thompson my friend." Marcus extended his hand again, this time in friendship rather than professionalism. "The honor would be mine, Colonel Wright." As they shook hands again, the children clapped excitedly. Their innocent joy at seeing two adults resolve their differences brought smiles to everyone watching. Mrs. Davidson was visibly moved. "Children, what you've witnessed tonight is a perfect example of how good people can disagree but still treat each other with respect and kindness." The evening's charity auction proceeded successfully, raising record amounts for the Children's Hospital. But the real success was the transformation that had taken place in the hearts and minds of everyone who witnessed the interaction between Marcus and Wright. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the ballroom, with guests sharing the story and praising Marcus's remarkable handling of the situation. 3 months after the charity gala, the impact of that evening continued to ripple through many lives. Wright had become one of Marcus's strongest supporters, often visiting the palace to have coffee and conversations about leadership, service, and life. The story of their encounter had spread far beyond the ballroom. Local newspapers picked up the story, praising Marcus's dignified response and Wright's willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and change his perspective. Wright decided to do something meaningful with his newfound understanding. He established a mentorship program connecting retired military officers with young people from diverse backgrounds who were interested in careers in public service. Marcus was his first recruit to help design and run the program. "I realized that night," Wright explained to a newspaper reporter, "that I had been judging people based on appearances rather than character. Marcus Thompson showed me what real leadership looks like. It's not about commanding others, it's about inspiring them through your actions." Marcus was promoted to senior guard 6 weeks after the gala. His supervisor, Captain Williams, explained that the promotion was based on his years of excellent service, but admitted that his handling of the Wright situation demonstrated exactly the kind of judgment and character they wanted in leadership positions. The children from the charity organization sent Marcus a handmade thank you card with drawings of him in his uniform. Sarah had written in crayon, "Thank you for showing us how to be nice to mean people." When Marcus showed the card to Wright during one of their coffee meetings, the older man's eyes filled with tears. "From the mouths of babes," he said quietly. That little girl understood exactly what happened that night. Ambassador Chen, who had witnessed the entire encounter, invited Marcus to speak at an international conference on conflict resolution. Marcus's presentation about turning confrontation into conversation received a standing ovation from diplomats representing 40 countries. What Guard Thompson demonstrated, Ambassador Chen told the conference, is that the most powerful response to prejudice is not anger or defensiveness, but grace and education. He turned a potential enemy into an ally through patience and wisdom. Wright attended the conference to support Marcus. During the question and answer session, he stood up and addressed the audience. "I was the man who confronted Guard Thompson that night," he said, his voice clear and strong. "I came to that event carrying 40 years of wrong thinking. In 5 minutes, this young man changed my entire perspective on leadership, respect, and human dignity. He didn't just handle a difficult situation, he transformed a life." Marcus and Wright's friendship became a symbol of hope for many people who believed that deep-seated prejudices couldn't be changed. They began speaking together at schools, community centers, and military bases about the power of dialogue over confrontation. A year later, at the next annual charity gala, Marcus and Wright stood together as co-hosts of the event. The ballroom was packed with guests who had heard their story and wanted to support both the charity and the message of understanding they represented. Wright addressed the crowd during dinner. "Last year in this very room, I learned that true strength isn't about standing rigid in your beliefs, it's about having the courage to grow when you're shown a better way." Marcus concluded the evening with words that had become his signature message. "We all have moments when we can choose between making ourselves smaller through anger or making ourselves bigger through grace. Every time we choose grace, we don't just change ourselves, we change the world around us." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. In the back of the room, Sarah, now 9 years old and still attending the charity events, turned to her mother and whispered, "He's still being nice to the mean man." Her mother smiled and whispered back, "Honey, there are no mean people in this story anymore. Just friends who learn to understand each other." The transformation that began with one man's calm response to injustice had created ripples of positive change that continued to spread. proving that sometimes the most powerful revolutions happen not through force, but through the quiet dignity of those who choose understanding over anger.